it just felt like, what? Like, is this fun for him? Is this like a test?
Pines bring.
Well, I mean, inmates have procedures all the time. I mean, you have folks there with cancer, you have folks there with, serious other chronic diseases. And sometimes it does require individuals to have surgery even while they're on pretrial status. So,
what if the most dangerous place for Diddy isn't the courtroom at all, but the rumors swirling around his prison cell? That's exactly where we found ourselves when Joe Rogan dropped a claim so incendiary it jolted the whole case back into the spotlight. He suggested on a recent show that Diddy had been infected with HIV behind bars after an assault by fellow inmates. We've watched wild allegations rise and fall around this man for years, but this one detonated because of how specific it sounded and how neatly it slotted into the public's image of MDC Brooklyn as a pressure cooker. And yet, even as the clip surged across social media, insiders close to the investigation stressed that no medical evidence backs the claim. Still, the fact that a figure with Rogan's reach even introduced the idea shows how fragile Diddy's situation has become since September 2024, when he was first taken into federal custody.
Are you concerned that Sean Diddy Combs could be assaulted, violently assaulted? Is that a thing? Because based on what was said in court, it feels like a thing.
What we can say for certain is that the frenzy didn't appear out of thin air. It hit during a moment when Diddy's physical safety behind bars was already under national scrutiny. And when you combine that with a public hungry for any sign that the once unstoppable mogul is unraveling in real time, every whisper gets amplified. Rogan's allegation wasn't presented as confirmed. His network hasn't commented, and medical privacy prevents any official verification. But the speed with which the narrative spread tells us something important about where Diddy stands today. People have been primed to believe the worst, and the gravity of the rumor alone makes it impossible to ignore. The timing is what pushed everything into overdrive, because just weeks earlier, during Diddy's sentencing in July 2025, his longtime friend Charlucci Finney publicly described literal amazing a nighttime attack inside MDC Brooklyn that left the courtroom stunned. According to Finney, and confirmed by sources familiar with the case, Diddy woke up with a makeshift blade pressed to his neck while sleeping on the 4 North unit. It happened before dawn, in a dorm packed with around 20 other men, and no one can say whether guards intervened first or whether Diddy jolted awake and forced the man back. The official version came from attorney Brian Steele, who told the judge it was a guard who stopped the shiv-wielding inmate. Finney's description was blunt. He woke up with a knife to his throat. That was one of the rare lines we can actually use, and it was enough to shift the courtroom's temperature in seconds.
Diddy claimed that somebody held a knife to his throat. He woke up and this guy basically had him and he had the knife, and Diddy was at this person's mercy. Now, it's unclear what exactly happened from there. Was there a guard that came in? Did Diddy somehow fight this person off? Well, seems unlikely that happened. Or did the person just leave? Bottom line, this guy, at least according to people close to Diddy and Diddy himself, could have hurt him badly or even taken his life.
The location matters here. MDC Brooklyn has been called everything from difficult to hell on earth, and those aren't just dramatic turns of phrase. The facility has dealt with overcrowding, frozen conditions during the 2019 power failure, violent altercations, and most recently, photos circulated by defense teams that allegedly showed infested food trays. A spokesperson for the Bureau of Prisons disputed the presence of insects in the photo from February 2025, but defense lawyers like Sabrina Schroff insisted the issue is long-standing. It's the same place where Edwin Cordero lost his life in a fight, a case that drew national attention last summer. When someone is placed in a facility with that kind of history, we can see why Rogan's rumor gained traction. The environment alone practically invites speculation. Behind that knife attack was another twist. Finney has visited MDC repeatedly and said being charged with any form of intimate misconduct-related offense marks a person as a target. He said he's lost sleep fearing that inmates view cases like Diddy's as personal affronts, the kind of things some prisoners try to settle themselves. And when we remember that Diddy had been acquitted on the most severe counts during his 8-week trial, but convicted in July on 2 counts of transporting individuals for inappropriate encounters, the nuance often gets lost in the noise. Public perception doesn't work on fine print. It works on headlines. And the headlines around Diddy have been relentless, especially once TMZ reported in late 2024 that Donald Trump had considered a pardon request, a story the White House rejected on the record.
If the
in October,
in October 3rd, if the judge denies bail, then Trump is going to make a decision possibly immediately thereafter.
Most likely, the judge is going to, based on previous decisions, it feels like the judge is going to deny.
Through all this, Diddy himself has pushed a narrative of transformation. On the eve of his sentencing, he wrote to Judge Arun Subramanian, describing how he'd been attending self-improvement classes and teaching business fundamentals to fellow inmates. At MDC, he built out a 6-week program called Free Game, which earned praise from case managers and assistant wardens who watched him bring divided groups together in a communal space on 4 North. By October 2025, he'd already talked about expanding it to juvenile centers after release. And when former inmate Raymond Castillo spoke to Us Weekly in November 2025, he said the class gave men a sense of direction that had been missing. But here's where the contradiction starts to sharpen. Prosecutors accused Diddy of running afoul of the rules, even while claiming personal growth. They said he'd purchased phone time from other inmates and placed unapproved third-party calls. CBS News reported in November 2025 that he'd allegedly participated in a 3-way phone conversation days before being transferred to FCI Fort Dix. His team insisted this particular call was attorney-initiated and covered by legal privilege. Then came the story about homemade fermented beverages at Fort Dix a week into his stay, which his spokesperson called completely untrue. The Bureau of Prisons never detailed why, but by mid-November 2025, Diddy's release date had been pushed from May 8, 2028 to June 4, 2028, a nearly 1-month setback that landed without explanation.
Diddy's knee has been bothering him recently, so he reported it. At some point, it was decided that he needed medical care outside of the jail, so he was taken to a Brooklyn hospital.
So now we're left with an image of a man who says he's focused on healing, discipline, and unity, yet still finds himself flagged for procedural issues that keep extending his timeline. We can't ignore how easily these mixed signals feed the machine. When someone is sent to prison for high-profile misconduct, every move becomes a referendum on who they really are. Does the entrepreneurship program reflect genuine change, or is it an effort to present good behavior to the appeals court? Is the alleged bending of rules a product of entitlement, desperation, or sheer confusion in a chaotic facility? And what does it mean that insiders now treat Rogan's HIV claim as part of a larger pattern of rumors filling the vacuum around Diddy's declining power? Meanwhile, the appeal paperwork is already in motion. His attorneys filed a formal notice the same day the White House shot down the pardon talk. They argue the judge extended the sentence too far, especially considering the jury acquitted him on multiple counts including racketeering. And they maintain their client never intended to harm anyone. The irony is that even as they fight to shorten his time, the institutions holding him seem to be inching that time forward. It's become a tug-of-war between a legal team focused on rebranding him as a man on a new path and a correction system that keeps marking him for missteps.
So here's what I thought he was going to say. Your Honor, and he does his whole apology and remorse and all of that, and he does it all. And then at the end, he says this. Your Honor, respectfully, I would like to say that I now understand what President Trump was saying when he said that the Justice Department was weaponized against him.
All of that feeds back into the darkest question raised by Rogan's viral comment. Because if people believe Diddy is in declining health, whether that rumor holds any truth or not, the narrative shifts from punishment to containment. If the conditions at MDC Brooklyn were already damaging, and if Fort Dix is now the stage for new procedural issues, then every extra month on the calendar takes on a different kind of weight. And when we factor in the incoming motions, the ongoing lawsuits, the pressure piling up around his name, and the uncertainty around his physical state, we start to see why his lawyers seem to be fighting not only for reduced time, but for something that feels much more urgent, especially now that insiders are whispering that the clock might be working against him even faster than the public realizes, just as one more development cuts into view and forces us to reconsider what his team is really trying to prevent. Is Diddy slipping toward collapse in prison? That's the question hanging in the air, the one nobody inside his camp will touch, even as Rogan's HIV claim keeps burning through every corner of the internet. We can see how the silence has become its own kind of answer. No denial from the lawyers, no retaliation suits, no fiery response from a man who once micromanaged every headline, from his fragrances to his white parties to his carefully designed comebacks. And when someone with decades of PR mastery suddenly goes mute on the most explosive rumor of their career, we have to wonder what that tells us. It's the contrast that hits hardest. The mogul who used to jump on any narrative the second it formed now stands motionless, while this one grows taller than the charges that put him behind bars in the first place.
So why should I care? He did a whole lot of a whole lot of people. And now he's paying for it. So all these cats, I guess y'all get y'all visitation rights. Some of y'all can get y'all conjugal visits right with him.
That silence only grew louder when he was moved from MDC Brooklyn to FCI Fort Dix in late October 2025. On paper, Fort Dix looks like a reset button. Lower violence, a structured rehab program, cleaner dorm layouts. It's the kind of facility lawyers lobby for when they want to signal that their client is engaged in rehabilitation, not sinking deeper into chaos. But when we talk to insiders who've watched Diddy's saga unfold since September 2024, they frame the transfer differently. They say this wasn't about a new chapter. This was a rescue mission. MDC had become a trap, a place where an aging figure with high-profile misconduct convictions was one blade away from vanishing overnight. And even though Fort Dix feels gentler, we can tell it's still a cage, just one with softer edges. The rules are tighter, the watchfulness stronger, and the stress of constant legal warfare hasn't left him. He's 56 now, his hair turning gray in that November mugshot, and people who've seen him say the toll is setting in, layer by layer. Meanwhile, the bigger story stretching behind these last 13 months refuses to go away.
Every accusation that trailed him since the early 2000s, every claim from industry insiders about violent behavior, every testimony from the Cassie Ventura trial, where she described years of intimidation, and those notorious freak-off nights with hired companions, all of it floods back into the spotlight now. Even though he was acquitted on the most severe misconduct trafficking charges, the public memory doesn't split hairs. And when Rogan connects his current state to what he called Diddy's decades of silence, we can see why the narrative feels inevitable. The idea that someone who built an empire by controlling every room, every relationship, every detail, is now confined in a place where he controls nothing, gives the whole saga a sense of cosmic reversal. Diddy built an empire on control, but in prison, he's not in control of anything. Not his safety, not his health, not even his story.
Same kind of extortion that we heard when Cassie took the stand and testified on that airplane ride back from France. Diddy said, "You don't do a freak off, I'm going to release one of the freak off videos that you are profiled in and humiliate."
The tension around his legacy is what makes this moment feel so unstable.
On the outside, he once shaped the culture of hip-hop, fashion, and nightlife. He launched careers, signed massive deals, and fueled a myth of invincibility that lasted nearly 3 decades. But since the leaked hallway footage from 2016 resurfaced in 2024, followed by more than 100 lawsuits accusing him of manipulation and misconduct stretching back to 1991, the narrative hardened. We're watching a man who weaponized power now stripped of every layer of protection. And even if half the whispers about his crumbling health turn out to be exaggerations, the reality is that constant tension accelerates wear in ways that don't show up on paper. The stress of repeated court filings, mounting civil claims, and a sentence that pushes into 2028 can change a person faster than the public realizes. Fort Dix may not be MDC,
But it's not freedom, and insiders are already circulating stories of him looking thinner, quieter, and far less confident than the man who once described himself as unstoppable. We can see the cracks most clearly when we look at the prison syllabus he helped build, especially the lessons centered on removing ego. On paper, it reads like the outline of someone trying to peel back layers of pride and control, encouraging peers to find humility in a place designed to strip people bare. It's the kind of doctrine that would feel transformative coming from anyone else. But given Diddy's history, it lands with a different weight. His entire career, from the earliest bad boy years to his ambitious lifestyle branding, was built on projecting invincibility. So as we examine that no-ego doctrine, we're forced to question whether this is introspection or strategy, the beginning of self-awareness, or simply another presentation crafted to impress counselors and judges.
The strange part is how sharp the contrast has become between the coursework he promotes and the whispers about his behavior in both facilities.
While he pushes lessons about discipline and transparency, he's also surrounded by reports of prohibited three-way communications and that infamous fermented concoction story that erupted during his first week at Fort Dix. His team insists these issues are exaggerated or misinterpreted, but the disconnect is hard to ignore. We're watching a man preach structure while allegedly testing boundaries, and it makes us wonder which version is authentic. Is he slipping into old habits out of stress, or is he simply incapable of giving up the sense of exceptionality that carried him for decades?
You already know I gotta get your take on it, man. And Diddy, he got 50 months in prison. How you feeling about it, man?
Well, since this is going to be my last Art of a Dialogue interview, and the Diddy trial and the Diddy saga is over, like the Gene Deal story ain't bigger as the Diddy trial, or the...
Underneath all of this sits the uncomfortable truth about how strongly Diddy's identity was tied to control. He controlled his environment, his partners, his employees, and his imagery.
He controlled what the press was allowed to see and what insiders were pressured to hide.
Even the notorious parties that trail him were built around managing every variable, ensuring he stayed at the center of gravity. But behind bars,
none of that influence survives. He doesn't decide who sleeps in the bed next to him, who watches his movements, or whose hands prepare the meals. For a figure who once calculated every detail, the loss of that power isn't just logistical, it's psychological. This erosion of control may be the most revealing part of his downfall. Once he entered federal custody in September 2024, every part of his crafted persona started peeling away. The lavish image, the carefully curated entourage, the luxury travel, the network of handlers who smoothed over controversies. Now, we're left with a man who has to wait for guards to unlock doors and rely on case managers to approve classes he wants to teach. And as the lawsuits, depositions, and appeals build, that loss of agency grows sharper. The tougher question is whether he recognizes this shift or simply pretends he's adapting until he can find a way to flip the script again. When he writes letters to judges or launches his free game courses, we can feel how heavily he leans into the narrative of self-improvement. Maybe there's truth in it. Maybe he is trying to rebuild something from the wreckage. But we've also seen him use reinvention as a shield before. And it's not unreasonable to wonder whether this latest version is any different. His life has always been defined by theatrics. Big statements, big rebrands, big pivots. And these new gestures, however polished, fit the pattern of someone who knows how to perform transformation when the moment calls for it. So as we watch him lecture others about introspection and humility, we can't ignore the larger question looming behind it all. Is this a man genuinely seeking redemption, trying to reckon with decades of chaos? Or is it simply the last play of someone who's always manipulated the narrative to stay ahead? Because for the first time since he built his empire, he isn't in charge of the timing, the optics, or the outcome. And that's why, when we hear about the classes he teaches or the messages he sends to the court, we have to look deeper and ask ourselves, is this growth? Or is it the final move of a figure who's losing control of the only story that ever truly mattered to him?
I think if I'm handicapping it, if somebody comes to me and says, Mark, what do you think about an appeal? It's not Sean Combs, it's somebody else. The judge found sentencing guidelines that were over 70, and the judge went under by 20. And then I'm asked, I went to trial, I lost on a couple of counts, and the judge went under what probation suggested the guidelines are. I would tell you that an appeal is it's always a heavy lift. It just becomes a Herculean lift.
Those close to the legal process say his appeal is moving faster than expected. His team filed the notice immediately after sentencing in October 2025, accusing Judge Arun Subramanian of broadening punishment beyond what the jury intended. They're framing every misstep, every procedural call flagged by CBS News, every rumor about a fermenting bottle, every suggestion that he broke phone rules, as either misunderstandings or outright fabrications inspired by the frenzy around his name. But even if they manage to win the appeal, the civil lawsuits that pile up behind it will trail him for years. That's why Rogan's rumor sparked such a nuclear reaction across social media. Not because the public believes it outright, but because it fits the psychology of a man cornered by both the system and the shadows of his past. His final empire isn't bad boy records anymore. It's a tangle of lawyers, filings, and sealed medical reports that form the walls around him. And then we reach the question that's been stalking every conversation. So what happens next? Either Rogan's HIV claim fades into the swamp of forgotten scandals, or it becomes the spark that reveals a far deeper decline. Maybe Diddy stabilizes at Fort Dix, throws himself into the rehab program, rebuilds the free game curriculum, and waits out the calendar until June 2028. Or maybe the stress keeps tightening, the legal pressure keeps building, and the rumors about his condition morph into something harder to ignore. But here's the twist that keeps this whole saga unpredictable. Diddy has always been a survivor. Every decade of his career, he's found a way to flip disaster into momentum. And if there's one rule in his world, it's this: never bet against him. So tell us, do you think this is the final chapter of the once untouchable mogul? Or is he planning one more unbelievable comeback? Drop your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.